Aanandha Sharurajah, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Singapore. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah in the United States. And today we're going to be talking about your recent book, Stroke of Gratitude: How to Find Truth, Love, and Happiness in Healing After a Health Crisis. I think the world is in need of a much bigger dose of gratitude, generally speaking. I think all of us would be happier if we could look on the bright side and look for the things to be grateful for, both at work and at home and in our communities. But that can be challenging, especially because people have legitimate traumas. People have health crises. They have family relational crises. They have workplace crises. All of that is real. And we don't want to sweep it under the rug, and we don't want to just pretend like everything's fine. But looking for, amidst the adversity, looking for the things to be grateful for can be a really great, healthy practice. So that's what we're going to be exploring together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Aanandha's bio with everybody. When Aanandha moved to Singapore from Malaysia as a young man, he only had a few dollars in his pocket and big dreams to keep him going. Fast forward a few decades, and he found himself running one of the largest spas in Singapore, bringing in 35 million a year. The only problem, his stress levels were through the roof. After debilitating stress-related stroke left him paralyzed, he realized he had to change the way he lived his life, but knew only one thing for certain: he would never give up. It's a really compelling personal story. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to unpack that and explore this together today. Before we dive on in, anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context, and then we'll just get started.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your invitation. It's really nice for me to be invited to a top podcast like yours. And I just wanted to say that the past 11 and a half years, I have been going through trying to do much to educate people about the importance of health. And I, I feel that I had the stroke. There was a reason that I needed to tell the story of and to come up with this book because there are lots of things that we sometimes don't um, take for granted, and
Mm-hmm.
health is very important. And
Yeah.
I learned a lesson, but it's a lesson that has helped me uh, understand that I have a story to tell the world, that health is the most important thing, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that health and wellness in the workplace has become more of a hot topic recently, really in recent years, largely due to the pandemic. I mean, certainly wellness programs were a thing pre-pandemic, but I'm not sure how committed organizations really were towards the physical and mental health of their employees. But the pandemic really shone a light on that. And we realized not only was burnout a big deal, but all sorts of related mental health challenges, physical health conditions, all of that became, pushed to the forefront for organizational leaders. And so we're talking about it way more now than I think we were even 4 or 5 years ago, which is a good thing. The challenge is we still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of improvements to make in the workplace to make sure that we're prioritizing health. Like you said, you've had great career success and a fantastic motivational story in and of itself, from a pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of, work hard, find success kind of a point of view, but also at what cost, right? Like there's only so much you can do. And that's why, I don't like the term pull yourself up by the bootstraps, because first of all, I think most people work pretty hard. Some people don't, but
Yes,
most people do.
yes,
And we all have different layers of privilege. And so me pulling myself up by the bootstraps probably looks different than you pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and,
yes,
every other person. And so it's a cliche we often use. I'm all for tenacity. I'm all for grit. I'm all for people working hard. But not to the extent where you're not sleeping, where you're not having a healthy life work harmony and balance, where things are integrated well in a way that's healthy and sustainable. And that, I think that's what you were finding. Great career success, but also realizing that it's not, you weren't on a sustainable track, and ultimately it caused you, some major health issues. So why don't we start there and talk more about the stroke that you experienced, what kind of led up to it, what the causes were and weren't, and then we can start to go from there.
Okay, thank you, John. Basically, I was a very healthy person, and no one knew, no one felt that I would have a stroke. But what happened, John, just 6 months before my stroke, that's in January 20, 2012, I was facing a stressful situation with partnership that I brought into my company.
Hmm.
And this caused me a lot of stress. And was only sleeping about 4 hours a day,
Hmm.
6 months before the stroke. And I only realized, John, that my pressure had gone up when I was unfortunately in the ambulance after my stroke. When
Hmm.
the ambulance crew, I could hear them say that my pressure was really high, but that was too late, unfortunately. So for me, right, it's just 6 months of stressful situation that caused the increase
Hmm.
in my pressure that caused the stroke.
Yeah, and like you said, lack of sleep, that's going to take
Yes,
its toll. Obviously, stress and anxiety contribute to that lack of sleep, and then there's a bit of a spiral effect when you're not getting enough sleep. Blood pressure was an issue, of course. I imagine there were a variety of health-related issues that started in that 6 months to manifest. Um,
yes,
and and it's just so hard because so many of us find ourselves, we get sucked into kind of the day-to-day grind of whatever we're doing. We're
yes,
passionate about what we're doing. We have people depending on us, so we want to deliver, all of those things. Those aren't bad things. But if we can't do it, you know, with moderation in measured amounts, we simply can't sustain it. Um, and while there are people, I've heard of people who can consistently get 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night and function at a high level. That's not how the human body and the human brain were meant to work. And I
yes,
think if people can function that way, I think that's the super rare exception. Most people really need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, good sleep a night. You need to exercise, you need to have a good diet, you need to have meditative, self-reflective, mindfulness practices. You have to do these things consistently, and if you don't, pretty soon you will find yourself overwhelmed, and it may be burnout, but uh, it could elevate to the standpoint of more serious health conditions like a stroke or a heart attack or debilitating anxiety or whatever the case may be. So tell us what you did about it. So once you have this event, this stroke, you get rushed to the hospital. What changed for you professionally and in your personal life after the stroke? And
yes.
what would you have done differently leading up to it if you had known that it was coming?
Yes. What happened? Uh, I was lucky that my wife had joined me just 10 years before that. So she was able to take over running the company. And for me, the first 3 months was the most difficult. It was me um, trying to be able to speak again.
Mm,
Um, and half my body, my right side, was paralyzed at that time. And I thought that I would be back maybe within a year, but I didn't realize that my paralysis was was going to be long-term thing. But I I was always positive about my recovery, and in the 3 months, I was able to slowly learn how to speak again, and we I was lucky that I was covered by insurance, so I
Hmm.
would have uh, twice a day speech therapy and twice a day um, physiotherapy as well as occupational therapy. And it was lucky that I had this um, insurance, which allowed me to get the kind of medical services that I
Yeah.
would otherwise not be able to afford. And so I was lucky that within 3 months, I was able to leave the hospital and recover at home. But because mine was serious stroke, now it's 11 and a half years since that date, and I'm still working very hard to try and get some um, um, mobility in my hands and legs again, John.
Hmm. Yeah, even this many years later. So the serious nature of something like a stroke, we shouldn't downplay it or diminish it, right? It really has tremendous long-term effects. And I think employers need to be very mindful of this. Like we, as organizational leaders, need to be very proactively protecting our people from a workload that produces this kind of an outcome, right? So often leaders talk about wanting to get more out of their employees, get squeeze every ounce of productivity out of somebody. They can work long hours, they can work late, they can work weekends, etc. And a lot of times those leaders are put up as like examples of excellent leaders, and that is something that is a norm, a cultural component that needs to change. That's not evidence of a good leader. That's evidence of somebody who steps on people to make themselves look good, to get the organization ahead, or to make themselves more money or whatever. And at what cost? You end up stepping on people. You end up hurting people. Um, well, in the long run, I think it also hurts the organization. Certainly, in the short run, you might be able to get away with it. But far too often, leaders are so focused on performance and productivity, which are important. Don't get me wrong. We need to have good, effective, efficient, productive organizations and teams bringing value to the market. Otherwise, we're not going to exist as an organization. But there needs to be a healthy
Correct.
balance, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our people. So if we see someone working every weekend, we see someone putting in way too many hours during the week, we see someone getting burdened down, the signs of burnout, anxiety, having other health conditions, that we step in and we encourage them to take time off, take a vacation, take a personal day, reduce their hours, delegate some of their responsibilities, whatever, just to make sure that that person or those people who are experiencing those things can be, not only healthy, but if you're more healthy, then you are contributing to your team more. I mean, talk about like the long-term recovery that you experienced. If you were an employee for an organization and that occurred, that is a huge amount of lost productivity that the organization then has to deal with because of your health condition, right? And so even if you don't focus on the human component, the human case, I think it's just we can agree that we need to treat people better than that. We need to treat people with dignity and respect and humanely. But even if you set that aside and you just talk about the organization's ability to do what it does, to be effective, to produce, it's in their interest. It has a strong business case, bottom line impact on the organization being able to be productive as well. So let's not forget that. Let's make sure that we have balance in all things, that we don't overwhelm people, that some organizations really do have the mindset, we're just going to chew them up and spit them out. We're going to pull people in. We're going to get every last ounce of productivity and creativity and innovation out of them for a couple years. We'll use them up. Then they can go on their way and we'll get the next person. And that, in my mind, is a morally reprehensible strategy and
Yeah,
approach to how
I
you
agree.
deal with people.
Yes,
And so, let's be honest about it. Let's have some honest conversations and push back when leaders are being unreasonable in what their expectations might be. So 11
yes,
years plus now past your recovery, you're still recovering. You still have elements that you're trying to heal from and recover
yes,
from. Can you talk to us about the importance of positive mindset throughout this whole process for you, um, as you experience the stroke, as you've moved into recovery, as you've gotten back into professional life, balancing it with home and family. What has been the role of positive mindset for you to be able to heal not only your mind but also your body?
yes. I think the positive mindset has been very important, John. Um, most um, most medical doctors and physiotherapists will say that recovery from stroke is normally between the first 3 months to 6 months. But for me, I've had continuous improvements, even though my stroke was very serious. My doctors are very happy with my progress, even up to now. Um, and and that is because of my positive mindset, never wanting to give up, and me visualizing myself um, back to my previous self. So I think these are things that is very important. Unfortunately, um, many people who have had stroke um, give up, and when they give up, then uh, it becomes very difficult. But for me, my journey is in the positive direction that I want to do talks, right,
Hmm.
in companies in Singapore, where I'm invited, uh, at lunchtime talks, um, to um, peop to people can know how um, I could have avoided the stroke. And this is what is something that I'm very interested uh, to be part of. Yes,
Yeah, I think it's wonderful that you've had the opportunity to share your story, to kind of be a warning voice for people who may feel like they're invincible. Sometimes it's organizations and leaders exploiting workers, pushing them past their limit. That absolutely happens and it shouldn't happen. But it's also true that individuals make the choice. Like I'm ambitious, I want to progress in my career. Maybe I'm a workaholic, whatever. Like people make choices about their lifestyle and how they're going to get exercise and what they're going to eat, their diet, how much sleep they're going to get, how much work they're going to do, etc. We need to, as individuals, have healthy balance, and we need to
yes,
strike. We have to have healthy boundaries to maintain that balance. And so, if I'm one that's inclined to overdo it, to overwork, then I need to be aware of that tendency and recognize that I'm not invincible, even if I might feel that way, especially when we're younger. Like that's kind of a typical thing. Like a lot of young people just kind of feel like they're invincible. They can kind of do whatever they want. They have lots of bad habits that will eventually catch up with them, and you just can't maintain that long term. You might be able to even do it for a few years when you're younger, but as you get older, you just can't. You just can't do that. So, on an individual level, we need to be way more proactive about making sure that we are setting up healthy boundaries and guarding ourselves and our health. From an organizational perspective, we need to design work in such a way that it's more sustainable and healthy. We need to, from a leadership perspective, we need to make sure that we are not having unrealistic expectations and that we're actually supporting our people. a couple years ago now, it was probably 2 years ago, that I was having a conversation with a CEO, and they had a position open that they were trying to search for. They felt like it was an important position. They didn't feel like they had enough budget to pay what they had wanted to pay. And so their mentality was, we know we're only going to be able to pay 80% of market for this job, for what a
Yes.
person would normally expect. We're going to only be able to pay you about 80% of that, but I expect 1,000% of effort from you for that
Wow.
80% of pay. That was literally something that came out of her mouth.
Mm.
And she didn't see it as a problem at all. She felt like that was um, good leadership on her part, that she would have that kind of high expectations. And I had to push back and say,
Yeah.
in what world does that make sense, that we are essentially going to exploit someone for 10K times the 10 times the the productivity expectation for what we're actually paying them? That's
Yes.
completely unreasonable. And so leaders have a responsibility, so do individuals. Let's all do better in making sure that we're
Yes.
protecting each other, that we're supporting each other, and that when someone does have a health incident, that we can step in and pick up the slack, like your wife did for you. That we
Yes.
have
Correct.
we have a plan and a strategy for how other people can step in. That's why it's so important to develop your bench strength. So especially if
Yes.
you're in a leadership role, sometimes we talk about, like, what if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? You're a leader and you get hit by a bus tomorrow. What happens? What happens to your team? What happens to your projects? Do you have a plan in place? Have you developed your bench strength so people can step in and help? If we're constantly doing that, then we can be in a position where we're proactively maintaining balance and health and developing our people simultaneously, because we're delegating, because we're collaborating,
Yes.
because we're leaning on their expertise more. Um,
Yes.
Sorry, I kind of went on a soapbox there for a little bit.
Yes. But you're absolutely right, John. We do not know, you know, when uncertainty happens. And for me, it's something that I never would have expected when I was 55 to have such a serious stroke that would happen to me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And and, and it's cost me millions of dollars for my company, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time, being vulnerable, sharing your experience with us. I note the time and I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Thank you so much, John. What I would like to share is that 1 in 4 people in the world will have a stroke in their lifetime, and that 80% of strokes are avoidable. So I feel that if people know this, they would take more care about management of stress, management of sleep. These are two things that are very important, and I can be contacted on my website, which is strokeofgratitude.com.
Mhm.
And I would like to thank you, John, for your invitation today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about how you can collaborate and work together. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you'll all